Hey, what's up? Hello. If you're new here, my name is Kayla and you are watching Kayla's Bookish Vibes. Today's video is going to be my fall recommendation video. I'm so excited for this video. Fall has officially started, so we're going to go through some of the books that I have read and loved, and these books I think will give you all the fall vibes. I tried to pull books from different genres for different people, because if you're like me, then you don't necessarily like horror novels, but you still want to get into like the mood of fall. And obviously you don't have to be scared during the fall season. It's not all about Halloween. It can also just be like seasonal stuff. So there should be something here for everyone. So for my girlies who don't necessarily want to be scared, for my girls who don't mind a nice little thriller every now and then, there are some horrors mentioned in this as well. So I think I have everyone covered with this list of books. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the books that I think you should be checking out this fall. I'm going to start off with the one and only romance on my list. I don't have a lot of romances. When I'm thinking about fall, I don't necessarily gravitate towards romances. That's not what I'm looking to pick up in the cold and fall seasons. But this book by Mimi Grace called What a Match is definitely giving the fall vibes. The cover is stunning. And obviously the cover says fall all day. I actually read this book out of the recommended order because I refused to read it in the summertime. I had to read this in the fall, and I'm so glad I did. It's just such a sweet romance. They do lots of fall activities in this book. This is a dating my brother's best friend romance, and it's really good. It is part of an interconnected standalone series. So there is an order that you're supposed to read them in. However, I read this out of order and I don't think it messed with my reading experience at all. I still absolutely love this book. So if you are looking for a cute, sweet romance this fall, I highly recommend this one by Mimi Grace. It is available on KU. So in this book, we are following Gwen and Anthony. I could never remember the male main characters' names in romances, but we are following Gwen and Anthony. Gwen is looking for love. The dating scene is just not working out for her, so she decides that she wants to hire a matchmaker. And this matchmaker, obviously they use numbers and math and science to find someone who they think is really meant for you and who is compatible for you. This is important for Gwen because we explore a little bit of this with her parents. She doesn't believe that her parents are actually compatible, and that is why they struggled in their marriage, and she doesn't want to experience the same thing in her own relationship. So it's really important for her that the person she ends up with is compatible with her. While she's doing that, she ends up having to be roommates with her brother's best friend, and we go from there. I really loved Anthony, the male main character in this book, because he is very grumpy. And I don't know what it is about grumpy men in romance novels, but I love it. Like, I want you to be grumpy with everyone you meet except me. Like, I want to be your soft spot. And that's exactly what this gives. Highly recommend this book. If you're looking for a romance in the fall, you definitely need to pick this one up. I don't know if I said it already, but it is available on KU, so you don't have to have the physical copy. However, the physical copy is so pretty. Like, why would you not want that on your shelf? Next, we're going to get into some historical fiction. Now, historical fiction is personally my favorite genre, and I read it all year around. But for some reason, I feel like historical fiction is really a fall genre. If it's not something that you typically pick up on your own, I would encourage you to try picking one up this fall season, and I have a few to recommend. So the first one is Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. I really enjoyed this book. I read it earlier this year. In this book, we are following a nurse who is fresh out of nursing school. Her first assignment is to help young girls. When I say young girls, I mean like young girls. I think they're like 12. Maybe even one is younger. They're a pair of siblings. They're two sisters. And I believe maybe the oldest one is possibly 12. And the other one is younger than that. But she is charged with giving them and administering them birth control, which is, in her mind, a little ridiculous because they're not even sexually active. So she goes into this deep hole of trying to figure out, why are these girls needing birth control and what exactly is the birth control doing? This is based on true events. So go into it knowing that, and it can be a little heartbreaking. It wasn't a tearjerker for me personally, but check the trigger warnings because it could be a tearjerker for you. But I highly recommend this one, especially for the fall. It's just something about it. Something about the cover as well also just says a fall read, and I really enjoyed this one. Now, the next two books I'm going to recommend is by the same author. The first one being Yellow Wife. This is my first time ever recommending Yellow Wife to anyone to read, because this book really tore me up. If you are not able to handle like really hard, it's a slave narrative. So if you're not able to read those types of things, I don't recommend this book for you. You will be broken in two, okay? this book definitely broke me down. But if you love historical fiction and if you're able to handle and stomach and witness a slave narrative, then I do recommend this one. It was beautifully written, absolutely amazing. Like, you feel like you're in the book, and that's what lends, for me, that's what lended itself to me being so heartbroken, is because I felt like I was there witnessing all of the atrocities that were taking place in this book. In this book, we are following Phoebe. Now, although Phoebe is a slave, she's lived somewhat of a sheltered life up until the point of us starting the book. Her mother is considered the medicine woman on the plantation, and that has given Phoebe a certain level of protection. She was also a favorite of the master's sister, which had also lended her a level of protection. And Phoebe was under the impression that she would be set free at her 18th birthday. However, that does not happen, and instead Phoebe is sent away to a very horrible place on her 18th birthday, and we kind of just follow Phoebe as her life unfolds in a way that she didn't expect. This is a very hard book to get through. It is short, and the fact that this took me an entire month to read is beyond me, because I can typically get through a book like this in like 3 or 4 days, but I had to keep putting it down because I just wasn't necessarily in the best mind space to pick this book up. So I would definitely have a little self check-in and make sure you're in a good head place before you pick this book up. However, if you read this book, and if you've read this book and you haven't read The House of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson, you should. Now, this book I also recommend. You don't have to read them both. Okay, you don't have to read Yellowwife first in order to read The House of Eve. You don't have to. They're not connected in that way. You can just pick this book up, which I do recommend. This one is not nearly as heartbreaking as Yellowwife. This one definitely has a more positive spin on things. But there is an Easter egg in this book. So if you have read The Yellowwife and you haven't read The House of Eve, I highly recommend that you pick this one up and check it out, because there is a very small, tiny Easter egg in here. And when I realized what I was reading, I was kind of excited and glad that I had actually picked this one up first. Now, in this book, we are getting 2 different points of view from 2 different women who are living 2 different lives. This book takes place in the 1950s in Philadelphia, and we are following 15-year-old Ruby. Ruby she wants to be a doctor. She wants to go to school. She's a very smart and bright young lady, and she wants to go to school to become a doctor, and she's on track to do just that. She's been accepted into a very gifted program, and she also ends up falling in love with someone she's not supposed to be in love with. And some things happen between Ruby and her love interest that kind of derails her plans, that kind of takes her off of course of what she has planned for her life. And in order to deal with that, she has to be sent to a home for unwed mothers. That's all I'm going to give you for Ruby's point of view. Then we also get Eleanor's point of view, who lives in Washington, D.C. Now, she is in college. She's made it to college. And she comes upon a man while she's studying in the library who is very handsome, and he is very well to do, honey. They come from 2 different walks of life. Okay, they are both Black. So in that aspect, it is okay for them to be in love. But I love the way that Sadiqa Johnson also explores classism within the Black community, as well as colorism within the Black community. It's not enough just for 2 Black people to fall in love. They also have to be from the same class, and colorism also plays a role in their relationship. So although they come from 2 different walks of life and 2 different backgrounds, they have to try and make things work between the 2 of them. Now, something that Eleanor does want more than anything is a baby, and she is unable to get pregnant. So trigger warning if that is infertility is an issue for you and that's not something that you want to read about, I would say trigger warning for that. But I really loved this book. This ended up being my favorite book of 2023. Absolutely loved this book. And this one is signed by the author. Okay, this one is signed by the author. I do have a hardcover copy of this book as well that is also signed. I loved this book so much, and if you're into historical fiction and you don't read a single book off of this list, I do highly recommend that you pick this one up, because I loved it that much. So good. 5 stars for sure. That was our romance and our historical fiction. Now we're going to go into our horror novels, because I don't have that many, and I want to go ahead and get this one out of the way. You probably already know exactly what it is, because it's literally my favorite book of the year so far. And honestly, I don't see another book taking the cake at this point. I could eat those words later on in the year. We still have a little while to go in the year. But The Reformatory by Tananarive Due is the perfect book to read in these fall months. If you want to read a horror novel set in the 1950s, this is the book for you. Now, this book doesn't take place in the fall. I believe it takes place in the summertime. It does take place in the summer, but just the vibes of it gives fall spooky season vibes. Now this is a historical horror novel, so it's not horrific for the sake of being horrifying. There's a message in the horrifying elements of this book, but that is why I love it so much. There are ghosts in this book. Let me just tell you quickly what it's about. We have Robert and Gloria. Gloria is the older sister, and she is charged with taking care of her brother. Their mother has passed and their father is not currently in the picture, so it is up to her to honestly keep them together, and she's doing the very best that she can. One day while they are walking to school though, Gloria is accosted. Gloria is being harassed essentially by a young white boy on their way to school one day, and Robbie, being the younger brother that he is, tries to take up for his sister, and he ends up kicking the white boy in the knee, and that does not go over well. Because of this, Robert is sent to the reformatory school, which is supposed to be a school of reform for young boys who are not going down the right path. However, this is not a school for boys. This is more like a prison, and the boys there are being treated horribly. So Robert is just trying to survive this horrible school, and Gloria is doing the absolute best that she can to get him out of it. I loved the magical elements of this too. I feel like I don't talk about that enough when I bring this book up. There is like a magical element. Gloria has this ability to do certain and to see certain things before they actually happen, and I loved that element of it. I really think I'm going to do a reread of this book this fall season. It's amazing. Okay, there are Haints in this book, and the characters that are Haints are just so beautifully read in the audio version. So if you don't want to read this book because it is pretty long, I would recommend the audio. The audio book was amazing. But yes, highly recommend if you are looking for a good fall read that has some meat on it for you to chew on, that is just absolutely beautifully written, like masterful storytelling at its finest, then I highly recommend this book, and I cannot tell you enough how much I loved it. 10 stars. Speaking of magical books, there is a little magic in that book, but this one is a historical fantasy. Now, I just finished reading this book maybe not even a week ago. I believe my bookmark is still in it, but I finished this book and absolutely loved it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is called Daughter of the Merciful Deep by Leslie Penelope. Now this book is perfect for those who enjoy historical fiction and want to read historical fiction in the fall, but don't necessarily want it to be scary, right? This is definitely for those who love historical fiction and who also want some scary bits in there, you know, maybe in the month of October. If you love historical fiction, but not so much the horrific elements of like a horror novel, you're going to want to pick this one up because there's magic and it is fantasy, it's fantastical, but it's not scary in any way. So in this book, we are following Jane. Jane is just a young woman trying to save her town. She has lost her voice, but she is trying to save her town from being flooded. So the neighboring city is trying to take over this town, and they have told the people who live there, you have to leave. You have to sell your land and sell your homes and leave because we have built a dam, and in maybe I believe like 2 weeks time, they didn't give these people time at all to get off of the land. In like 2 weeks time, we're going to release the dam and this place is going to be flooded and you guys have to get out of here. Jane is trying to do everything in her power to save her town. I loved it. I loved the magical elements of it. I loved the magical, I guess, system of it. She doesn't necessarily have like magical powers, but she comes into these magical elements that enables her to help those that she loves. And I also loved Jane's character arc. I love the way that she discovered herself in this book and the way that she has forgiven herself in this book. This book talks a lot about redemption and forgiveness, not only of those around you, but forgiveness of self. And I absolutely loved it. So I highly recommend if you're looking for fantasy in the fall cozy months and historical, which I think are two very cozy genres, then I think you're really going to enjoy this one. Next is going to be a YA choice. It's not fantasy, but it is sci-fi. And I do believe that it's like a thriller sci-fi. That is called Out of Body by Nia Davenport. This is perfect for my scary girls who just don't like to be afraid, right? You still want the vibes of fall in the season, but you don't want to be scared. This is perfect for that. Also, if you have like a young person in your life and you want to do a buddy read with them, I highly recommend this. Is YA, but I do think someone as young as middle grade could also read and enjoy this book. I loved it. First of all, the cover sold me, okay? The cover sold me. I had no clue what it was about. I just saw the beautiful cover and decided, yeah, I'll read it. So in this book, we are following two best friends who are celebrating their friendiversary, and they decide to celebrate by getting piercings. They're going to do these piercings at home themselves. After they do the piercings at home themselves, they go to a party, and things get a little wild at this party, and one of the friends ends up passing out on the front lawn. And when she comes to, she realizes that her conscious mind is in a different body, and that the body that her conscious mind is in does not belong to her. So the entire book, we are trying to figure out, how did this happen? How did her conscious mind get transferred to someone else's body, and where is her body, and how can she get back into it? I loved it. Think Freaky Friday, but with two black girls. Absolutely loved this book. Such a good read, very short. Again, if you want to buddy read this fall season or this spooky season with a young person in your life, I highly recommend this one. Check it out from your library. It is so good. All right, now we're going to get into the thrillers. I feel like spooky season is all about fantasy and thrillers. I do have a lot of fantasy that I want to get into this fall, but I don't have a lot that I can necessarily recommend. I'm going to insert myself right here because there are actually a few fantasies that I thought about after the fact that I really want to recommend for the fall months. The first one I'm going to recommend is a YA fantasy, and this is a fall fantasy if I've ever read one. I'm not really sure why it slipped my mind initially, but Blood Debts by Terry Benton Walker. This takes place in New Orleans. There are witches, a whole community of witches. They are casting spells. They are being cursed. There's a zombie attack in this book. Like, this is literally the perfect YA fantasy book for the fall if I've ever read one. Highly recommend this one. It is a part of a duology and it is completed. So if you end up loving this one, you can check out the second book that's already been released. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know if that's necessarily fall, but I do know that the first one is for sure a good fall read. Another fantasy that I read and absolutely loved earlier this year, and when I think on it, the atmosphere of this book is very fallish. That is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I believe this is still available on Kindle Unlimited. I know it's since been traditionally picked up and published, which is how I got this beautiful Waterstones edition of it. I really enjoyed this book. The atmosphere of it is very dark and gritty, and I think that lends to like the fall vibes. It's not necessarily spooky or scary in any way. This is, again, a fantasy romance, so if you're into those, I think you would really enjoy this one. The dragons also give me like the fall vibes. When I think of fall, fantasy is a genre that I want to cozy up with, and I think this is a really good one to cozy up with. It is very long, so you're going to be cozied up for sure for a while, but the dragons are used in a very different way, and they're discussed as being like these celestial beings, which for me also screams fall. So highly recommend this one if you're looking for like a fantasy romance. I loved this book. Okay, so the next one I have is a duology. I really enjoyed this one, and I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it. Someone randomly mentioned it on TikTok last week, and I remember commenting like, this is such an underrated and under talked about series. So I want to mention it here on my channel, and I think it would be really good to start this series in the fall. The first book is called A River of Royal Blood, and the second one is called A Queen of Gilded Horns. It's just a duology. It is completed. Now, a brief synopsis just so you can kind of get like the vibes of it. We have two sisters. They're sisters. Two sisters who are princesses, and their mother is the queen. And in order for one of them to take the throne or inherit the throne, they have to duke it out with each other because only one princess can become queen. And in the society, they have to fight until the death. So you have to kill your sister in order to take the throne. Very dark, very fall, very good read. I enjoyed this one. I believe I gave it either a 4.5 or a 5-star. One of the sisters has like these really amazing magical powers, and the other one has powers, but she doesn't know how to use her powers, which obviously is a disadvantage if you have to fight your sister in order to take the throne and one of you must die. So I really enjoyed this book. The second book in the duology didn't wrap up necessarily in the best way. It was okay. It was okay. It wasn't nearly as good as the first one. I wanted it to be more of like a trilogy, and I wanted us to explore this world so much more because it's such an interesting and intriguing. There's fae in this world, and they're black. It's black fae. I really did enjoy this series, and I really wish the author would reconsider and make a third book because she still could. She could definitely still continue on with this series, but as of now, it is complete. Definitely recommend for the fall. Those are the fantasy books that I should have mentioned originally in this video that I really didn't think about until after the fact. So let's get back to the other book recommendations. The rest of these books will all be thrillers. Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is YA, and I believe it's a psychological thriller. Highly recommend this book. I did a reading vlog here on my channel, reading this book for the first time, reading this author for the first time, so I'll leave that link down below if you're interested in that. But I loved this book. In this book, we are following Mary B. Addison, who killed a baby. allegedly. So she has been accused and honestly convicted of killing a white baby when she was a young girl, and she was sent to baby jail, which I believe is just like juvenile detention or whatever. So she's been sent there and she spent 6 years in baby jail. That's what she calls it, baby jail. Once she gets out, she goes to a group home. Well, now Mary B. Addison is a teenager and she finds herself pregnant and she wants to keep her baby. So the state is having to decide whether or not to allow this young girl who has been convicted of killing a baby, if she's actually allowed to even keep her own baby. I loved the exploration of the mother-daughter relationship. The mother in this book is absolutely unhinged. This entire book, you are trying to figure out, are you rooting for Mary or not? Is Mary guilty of killing this baby or not? Psychological thriller at its best. It is tagged as YA. It does not read as YA. So if you haven't picked this book up and you want to read something from Tiffany D. Jackson, you definitely need to pick it up for spooky season, because this is definitely one of those ones that are just, it's a perfect vibe for like a nice fall evening. Highly recommend. The next book I'm going to recommend is S.A. Cosby's All the Sinners Bleed. This is a very atmospheric thriller and I highly enjoyed. Honestly, I haven't read an S.A. Cosby book that I didn't enjoy, but this one I really enjoyed, and well, I often think of it for like the fall and spooky months. So we are following Titus in this book, who is the first Black sheriff of a Virginia town. And this Virginia town doesn't experience a lot of murder. It doesn't experience a lot of crime necessarily. So it's a pretty quiet, sleepy town. However, there is a serial killer on the loose, and Titus, the first Black sheriff, has to uncover the serial killer. The way he stumbles upon the crime, I think, and discovers that there is a serial killer amongst them, I think is what makes this book so enjoyable. It is very fast-paced and very action-packed, and I highly recommend, honestly, any book by S.A. Cosby for the fall season, for the spooky months, but especially this one. I just love the atmosphere of this book, and I think if you're really into atmospheric reads, which I think we all are during this season, then you're really going to enjoy this one. Speaking of atmospheric reads, I'm going to recommend Do What Godmother Says by Ellis Stratton. I read this book earlier this year and I loved the atmosphere of this book. We are getting dual timeline and dual POV in this book. First timeline that we're getting is in the 1920s. And that honestly is what's giving me the atmosphere, the fall atmosphere, the spooky atmosphere that I love to read in the fall and winter months. In this book, just for that point of view alone, it is giving very much like a gothic thriller vibe. In the 1920s, we are following Estelle. Estelle is a painter, an artist, who has just recently met someone named Maud Bachman, who Maud insists that Estelle call her godmother, hence the title of the book. But Maud has volunteered to be a patron for Estelle. So she's going to fund Estelle's lifestyle so that Estelle can just focus on her art and making all of the beautiful pieces that she wants to make. However, in exchange for this, Maud Bachman will be the sole owner of everything that Estelle makes. And she's able to give Estelle input on what she should paint and when she should paint and how she should paint it. Obviously, there's going to be like a power struggle there. So that's the first point of view. The second point of view, and honestly the one that takes up most of the book, is in present day time, and we are following Shanice. Shanice has come across one of Estelle's paintings in her grandmother's home, and she went to get it appraised just to see how much it's worth. But when she realizes there is a history tied to this painting that's also tied to her own personal family, she wants to keep the painting. However, the person who does the appraisal for Shanice is not having it, and he wants this painting really bad. So highly recommend this book if you're looking for something atmospheric. This one will definitely do it for you. All right, I have one more book on my list. This one is going to be short and sweet, and that is My Sister, the Serial Killer. I really enjoyed this book. It's a very short read on audio, so if you don't want to read it physically and maybe you need something spooky to listen to while you're doing some chores around the house and getting things done, highly recommend that you check this one out. The title alone is telling you what this book is about. We have two sisters. One sister is like the beautiful sister. That's how they are described in this book. One is like the beautiful sister and everyone loves her. Everyone is immediately drawn to her. And then you have the older sister who is a nurse and who is responsible and it's always taking care of the younger beautiful sister. For some reason, the younger beautiful sister finds herself in a lot of relationships, and each relationship she finds herself in, somehow the male in that relationship ends up dead. And she's always calling her older sister to come and help her clean up the mess. It's very enjoyable, very short again, and perfect for the spooky season. So if you're looking for something quick and easy to read, that's still going to give you in that like scary mood vibe, I highly recommend this one. All right, y'all, those are all the books that I'm going to be recommending in this video. There's actually so many other books that I could recommend to you all for the fall season and for the spooky months, but I didn't want this video to be too long. So if you want to see a part 2, let me know. I would love to get that filmed for you all. Just leave it down in the comments below. Also, if there's some books that you think I should have on my radar, some books that I didn't mention here that you want to see me read here on my channel, please feel free to leave those in the comments down below as well. If you stayed and watched the entire video, first of all, thank you so much for watching the video all the way through. Please leave this comment to let me know that you stayed and watched the whole thing. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.